Hi everyone, welcome to another SEGI Evening School session brought to you by SEGI Group of Colleges. My name is David. I'm the moderator for today's session. Welcome to this live webinar titled Conducting Safe and Secure Online Classes in the Volatile Cyberspace, brought to you by SEGI Group of Colleges. Now, before we begin, I'd like to do a quick technical check. Can everyone hear and see me clearly? Just type yes if you can. You type yes if you can hear and see us clearly. A quick check. Great. I've seen a few yeses, a few thumbs up. All right, thank you everyone. Okay, a little bit of rules here. For those of you who have just joined in, I welcome you once again to this live webinar titled Conducting Safe and Secure Online Classes in the Volatile Cyberspace. My name is David, and I will be your host today. A quick briefing to everyone before we start. Okay, our session today should take approximately 45 minutes. Okay, during the session, we encourage you to type your questions in the comment section below, and our speaker will try to answer your questions during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We would also like to inform everyone that this webinar is recorded and will be used by SEGI University of Colleges and its subsidiaries in the future. Before we proceed, again, can everyone type in the comments section and share with us where are you connecting from? As I understand, there are registrations from all over Malaysia and also other countries as well. Just type in the comment section and share with us. Where are you from? There's one from Philippines. Welcome. Zios, Subang Jaya. All the way from Penang, Philippines. Our very own SEGI. Sarawak as well. Selangor, KL. Melaka. Great. Keep on typing in the comments. All right. Is everyone ready for the webinar? If you're ready, press 1. If you're ready, press 1. Okay. Right. Before we start, let me introduce our honorable speaker today. Now, our topic for today is conducting safe and secure online classes in the volatile cyberspace. And our speaker today is Professor Alistair Irons. All right, let me share with you a little bit about our speaker. Well, you can see on the screen, right? Professor Alistair Irons, he is the Academic Dean for Faculty of Technology, and his current subject-specific research centers are on cybersecurity and digital forensics, particularly on approaches to proactively reducing cybercrime, evaluating threat, sharing protocols and procedures, and professional accreditation in digital forensics. He's also interested in pedagogic research in computer science, focusing on problem-based learning, also on assessment and feedback. So there you go. So without further ado, let's welcome our speaker, Professor Alistair Irons. Over to you.
Thank you, David. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're safe and well. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm over in the UK. I was in Kuala Lumpur at the end of last year and had a wonderful time. Who thought we would be in this strange set of circumstances only 6 months down the line? It's quite shocking, quite frightening. However, as we consider education, there are a number of opportunities for us. I'm sure many of you will be thinking about your education and what it is that you're doing as we move into online delivery, moving away from face-to-face contact. It's absolutely fantastic, the amount of effort that one has seen globally as everybody tries to ensure that their students are looked after. And as we rush to the online classroom and using the tools and techniques associated with that, it's just wonderful. Someone said last week that the changes we've seen in the last 2 months would normally take 2 years to implement. So that's fantastic. But as we'll see later on in my talk, that rush to solution is also something to think about and be concerned about, particularly when it comes to being safe and secure in the online classroom. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So what I'd like to talk about today, and I look forward to your questions at the end, rather than try and deal with them as we go through, which is what we would be doing if I was doing face-to-face session. What I'd like to talk about today is the cybersecurity concerns with the digital classroom, but also to think about why cyber criminals might be interested in getting access to educational systems, into universities, into colleges, and indeed think about the value of data and student data. And that is something that is a particular concern for those of us who are involved in cybersecurity as we consider the expectations of the online classroom. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit around the issues that we need to address moving forward. I always like to think of challenges, and certainly COVID-19 has given us a whole series of challenges. I like to think of them as opportunities, and opportunities to reflect on our education provision and what it is that we do with our students, work in collaboration with our students, so that students get the best possible experience. Next slide, please. As I say, it's absolutely delightful to be invited to come and talk with you. I've been coming out to Kuala Lumpur and Malaysia for a long time now. I always have a wonderful time. It's a long journey, it's a long trip, but I'm always humbled and overwhelmed by the welcome that I get from colleagues and staff at SEGI, and it's always a delight to meet students. So whilst this is wonderful talking to you online, I would much prefer to be with you in person. And I look forward to the opportunities for coming out to Malaysia again in hopefully the not too distant future. We have been partners. The University of Sunderland has been partners with the SEGI group of colleges for over 15 years, and that relationship has grown and developed and evolved and moved from strength to strength, and hopefully it's only going to get stronger. As I say, these challenges, these issues that we have to deal with and overcome, it's how we deal with adversity and how we cope with adversity that makes our partnerships stronger. Thank you. Next slide, please. So, the University of Sunderland is committed to providing high quality education, both in the UK. We have obviously our campus, 2 campuses in Sunderland, city centre, and at St Peter's campus where I live. Some of you might even come across to study over here in the future. I certainly hope so. We have a campus in London, and of course we have our transnational education partners across the world. In Malaysia, we are delighted to be working with the SEGI group of colleges. We've, as I mentioned earlier, a long-standing relationship which has grown from strength to strength over the years. And currently, the programs that we are working on together are in electrical and electronics engineering, mechanical engineering, and automotive engineering. Those programs sit in the Faculty of Technology, where I'm Dean, but in the School of Engineering, which is one of 2 schools in the faculty, the other school being the School of Computer Science. Thank you. So, what type of environment are we looking at? And later on, I'm going to come and talk about the online classroom, the online education, the opportunities that are available. But I think it's worthwhile just taking a step back and considering the world that we live in, both pre-COVID-19, during COVID-19, and post-COVID-19. It's really quite disheartening to see a huge increase in the number of cyber attacks during the current circumstances that we all find ourselves in. There are many unscrupulous people out there who seek to take advantages of others' misfortunes. And you know, we are already starting to do research on what that looks like and what we can do to address, what we can do to detect and prevent and the like. But it's worth having a little think around the types of threat that are out there. So we have advanced persistent threats. These are often government-backed, very heavily financed, very well organized cyber criminals that seek to disrupt other countries' systems, seek to disrupt the way that we work, and seek to gain an advantage, which is not good. Often they are government funded and often very well organized, often as part of the military. So, for example, there are divisions of cyber attackers, cyber warriors in certain countries' defense military situations. So that's what we're up against. Then we have cyber crime. And there's a huge range of cyber criminals, from the opportunistic person, you know, the kid in their bedroom who's trying to do things and inadvertently hacks into the Pentagon, right through to organized crime, who are again very well set up, very heavily financed, very skilled in what it is that they do, and can cause significant amounts of damage and take significant amount of money out of the legitimate systems. Other situations that we need to be aware of are the likes of Anonymous and the WikiLeaks type folks who are involved in hacktivism. They believe that they are idealistically motivated in what it is that they do, that there's a rationale and a reason for what they're doing. They're trying to prevent government being too controlling. Interesting times for those types of guys at the minute. Then, of course, there's business competitors, people who are trying to find out what it is that others are doing, and there's been cases with airlines looking at each other's system to get ticket pricing information. There's the situation in Formula One, where the garages were hacking into each other to find out the fine detail around the competitive advantage of Formula One motor cars. Then we come to insider threats, and this is one that is possibly the least common and known about, but actually takes up almost a third of all cyber crime. These are people within inside an organization who are carrying out those crimes. Often very difficult to detect, often very difficult to spot, because they're very good at covering the tracks and obfuscating anything that they do, but a real issue for us. A real issue for us in education. I'll come back to this when I talk a little bit about the education systems. Then there are the nuisance threats. Many of you will have seen the stories in the press recently about Zoom bombing. And people have come into Zoom situations, Zoom chats when they shouldn't be there. There was a case in Vietnam where nuisance attackers put inappropriate images in a school Zoom situation. Very, very disturbing and most upsetting. And then, of course, there are issues around human error, and sometimes human error happens. Of course, it does. Everybody makes mistakes, but sometimes that is disguised. So the people who actually are doing things that they shouldn't be doing say they didn't mean it. It was a mistake. So that hopefully gives you an idea of the type of landscape that we are working in, not just in education security, but in all types of security. So, thank you. Next slide. As we move into changing education, and I've talked a little bit about the changing environment, the changing situation, and all our students across the globe are expecting, have always expected to have access to learning, to support the online learning, to support their face-to-face learning. It's something that we have been doing for many years with virtual learning environments, with the likes of Blackboard, the likes of Moodle, the likes of WebCT, all sorts of different products that have grown up over the years. But that was always there as, in most cases, as supplementary to that face-to-face learning. With COVID-19 and the lockdown that we're finding across the globe, that the thing has changed. The whole environment has changed. So from February, March time this year, we weren't able to do what we normally did. We're moving towards the new normal, whatever the new normal might be. But in this firefighting phase, if you like, there's been a real change in the educational environment. There's been a rush to produce fully online delivery to a greater or lesser extent. There are many providers in the marketplace, many people offering solutions, whether it's Zoom, whether it's Teams, whether it's WebCT, whether it's GoToMeeting, whoever it might be. They say, yeah, we do this wonderful thing. I get inundated with email offers of people saying that they're going to solve all my educational problems for me. And I'm very, very wary about of these. They say click on this web link and and all your problems will go away. But I think if I click on that web link, I think an awful lot more problems might just start, because that's a way to try and entice me into this cyber criminal world. The other aspect of the changing education is that when we were in the buildings in Penang or Kuala Lumpur, at KD, at SJ, we could manage and monitor what was going on. Similarly, at Sunderland, we were all sorts of learning analytics going on, and we could work out where our students were and what our students were doing. As our students go out into the world and continue to access the learning, then the game has changed. So they're working in environments at home. They might not have very good broadband. There might be a number of people in the family trying to use the same laptop. All sorts of different issues come to mind. some of those are great and it's fantastic, but others are situations that the cyber criminals might exploit. Thank you. Next slide. So there are many issues for us to consider, not least the fact that because we had to firefight, because we had to rapidly move and change direction, then the adoption of digital classrooms, that we didn't really care about security. We just wanted things to work. We wanted to make learning material available. We wanted to make sure that everybody could get signed on, where everybody was downloading software here, there, and everywhere, which was fun. Well, it was a means to get over a problem and deal with a set of issues. But we were bypassing security. The pragmatics of getting online, getting everything online quickly, meant that we were taking shortcuts. Often during those times that security was seen as a barrier and people were bypassing security. We were asking our IT services people to help us get round security. And so that's problematic. As we were in this already stretched environment, and many of us were having to invest in new equipment, new hardware, new software, we didn't want to pay any extra for cybersecurity. Yeah. So that then means that we are in a stressful environment. People are trying to make changes quickly. We don't have the time or the bandwidth or the capacity to do all the testing and trialing that we might normally do. And of course, that means that the cybersecurity, the cyber criminals can take advantage of this. And one of the things is around social engineering. I've already mentioned that in my email, I will have a number of phishing emails. The number of phishing attacks has skyrocketed in the last 2 months as people try and entice us into different ways of doing things. So if you only take one thing away from this session, be very, very careful about how you open your email. Only open web links or attachments from trusted sources. You don't be tempted by that quick solution because it might be, but it just as well might not be, and you're going to open up a whole raft of problems for yourself. That, and when we look at, as we'll see in a second, educational data, it's often difficult to realize or know if something has happened to your data. If you have a bank account or a credit card and somebody hacks into that, and all of a sudden your balance goes down, or you're getting phone call from your credit card people saying, "Whoa, you're spending over your limit," you realize very, very quickly that something has happened. But it might take an awful lot longer for you to realize that something has happened to your education data, your student records, your student data, because it won't be maybe until it comes to getting your exam results or getting ready to graduate that all of a sudden you find that there's an issue, or you find it as an issue. So it's not that it happens immediately. So understanding when you've been compromised is problematic in the environment that we're working in. Similarly, once something happens, so imagine a situation where somebody comes into the university systems. They maybe use a bypass through video conferencing, maybe come in through Teams, which has happened to link up to other university systems, so they can find ways through that set of circumstances and change student records or delete records or whatever it might be. It's then very difficult to go back in and correct those records because our systems aren't set up to enable that change. So, the legitimate people who are able to change those records actually find it very difficult to do so once those records have been compromised. Thank you. So, the value of student data. Now, you might think that your data, the data about you, it can't be worth anything to anybody, but that's not the case. Your data it can be really, really valuable. In fact, it might be even more valuable than financial data, particularly if somebody is trying to utilize that or sell that on in the dark web. Now, most of you, and forgive me for generalizing, will just be starting out on your career. So you won't have a car, you won't have a house, you won't be married, you won't be worrying about kids' school fees and the like just yet. That means that in terms of that presence, that online presence, your digital footprint, your digital fingerprint, it's open to use and abuse and misuse. So somebody taking your data, some really important data about you, about your date of birth, about where you're born, about your gender, about the courses you're studying, when you're going to graduate, all of these things are really, really useful pieces of information. Your passport data, your medical data that are held by colleges and universities, all really, really useful data to the cyber criminals, particularly when it comes to things like identity theft, and your student data can be used as the basis to create fake IDs. And again, if somebody creates a fake ID using you as an example, then when you come to apply for your mortgage or a car or whatever it might be, student finance or loans or whatever, they say, sorry, you've already got this. And that's really difficult to undo. There's also situations where your student data might be linked back to academic fraud. There's the potential that to create data glitches about you, and that's a potential for blackmail. As I said earlier, there's the opportunity to get into other university systems, things like personnel systems, payroll systems, research. There's a classic example in a non-educational situation where cyber criminals, they were actually fake cyber criminals, they were doing it as part of research, were able to get into the engine management system of a car through the music system, through the entertainment systems, and it was linked up to the engine management system, and the guys that were doing the experiment showed that they were able to take over control of a car and put the brakes on when the driver was doing 70 miles an hour. So not nice, but it just shows that these systems can link in to each other, often for very good reasons, but the cyber criminals exploit that. Then one of the things that we're all very, very worried about, and every educational institution across the world is worried around the potential for ransomware attacks. And these unfortunately have happened and will continue to happen. And the COVID-19 situation is going to make those situations worse. If these things happen, then it's a real problem, because the educational systems are really part of our national infrastructure, both in the UK and in Malaysia, and breaches to these systems can cause absolute chaos. Thank you. Next slide. Excuse me till I have a cup of sip of coffee. You'll notice my Batman mug, which means that we're always trying to be on the side of good. So cybersecurity in the classroom, what does that mean? Well, we can look at it a number of ways. So part of it is teaching our students about cybersecurity and teaching awareness about cybersecurity and talking about cybersecurity in the context of what we're learning, whether it's engineering or computer science or geography or whatever it might be. Every subject that we care to consider in the world today has got something to do with cybersecurity. So it's incumbent on us as teachers to talk to our students about cybersecurity. Another part of the issue is that digital natives, and most of you will be digital natives, think of the computer systems that you use, the internet and all the apps and all the technologies as really, really positive. Fantastic. I've got 3 young children here. They use technology and do things that, even I can't imagine what they're up to. But the digital natives tend to think about the positive aspects of technology without thinking about the risks, without thinking about the flaws, without thinking about the vulnerabilities. So it's really, really important that we teach our students and everyone, not just students, but the society in general, about cybersecurity as one of the key things about cybersecurity in the classroom. Okay, thank you. Next slide. So the thoughts for things that we need to be considering and thinking about to get our students to be responsible digital users, being safe and secure, thinking about when we're in the classroom, what does that mean? Being vigilant. If you're in a Zoom class or in a Teams class and there's somebody there that you don't recognize, then call it out. Tell your teacher, tell your tutors, because it's a really important aspect that we need to monitor. It becomes really problematic when we've got big, large groups. You're all using chat at the minute. I was in a session last week, and we had to suspend the session because somebody was putting inappropriate derisory comments about the speaker. The speaker wasn't me at that time. Putting them in the chat, so we suspended it and then moved them out. So being constantly vigilant and thinking about what it is that we're doing, thinking about what we are doing in the classroom. We're there to learn. We're there to find out about our subjects. Then it is important on us not just to think about those, but to think about what's going on in the classroom. In the same way that we would in a face-to-face classroom, if somebody was messing about, if somebody had brought a meal in or was, having a game of football in the back of the classroom, we would notice it. It's the same sort of thing in the digital environment. We need to be safe. We need to be secure. And part of the responsibility is on the teacher, part of the responsibility is on the educational establishment, but it's also a responsibility of the students in the classroom. It's also important that as students and as teachers, we tell you about this, about the value of your digital footprint. You might think that it's worthless, but it's not. Hopefully I've illustrated earlier that the bad guys, the cyber criminals, may well be interested in your data. We need to move away from the situation where we accept everything and accept everything at face value, and think about threats and vulnerabilities. Think about people who might be trying to attack our environments, and think about what that means for us, and think about what we can do to address that. We need to think about how we're going to recognize the trusted digital resources. I'm not trying to stop the online classroom in any way, shape, or form. I think it's really important that we have these huge jumps forward in online learning in the digital classroom. But we need to think about our environment. We need to think about what it is that we're opening. We need to think about the processes about recognizing trusted digital resources, because there are many wonderful people out there, as well as there being many bad guys. We also need to think about our digital devices, and one of the things that I advised when colleagues were moving to the home working environment was not to share your laptop with your family members. That caused a little bit of consternation, I have to say, but like my kids, they're using Google's Classroom to keep up with their schoolwork. Thankfully, I'm in a position that they've all got their own devices, they've all got their own accounts, they all are linked in to safe and secure infrastructure to protect them. We have a very tight control over the router in the house that we're living in. But sharing devices can be problematic because the cyber criminals don't differentiate. They don't differentiate between adults. They don't differentiate between college, university students. They don't differentiate between kids who are 5 and 6. And sometimes they might be easier targets. And as I mentioned before, that the systems are often linked in together, so that they'll cyber criminal will get into your home environment and put something into your home network, which can then be an exploit that they will come back to later. So thinking very carefully about your digital devices your laptops, your mobile phones, smartphones, everything that you're using. Be taking very, very great care with that. We also, and things to think about in the classroom, and thankfully it doesn't happen so much as we move into tertiary education and we go into college and university. But we need to make people aware, particularly young kids, around misuses such as cyberbullying and cyber harassment and the like. In the work that I have done in digital forensics, in the past, a number of cases have involved finding out about cyber harassment in the workplace. So, the really important things to think about and to consider. And then the other aspect around the online environment that we need to think about, and we had to think about it in face-to-face environment as well, but is to ensure that the work that you do, the work that every student does, is using technology in a positive and ethical way. So we don't have plagiarism, we don't have ghosting, we don't have falsification of our results. And it's really, really important that everybody works together to make sure that we're in that type of positive and constructive environment. Next slide, please. So, the cybersecurity in the classroom moving forward. Education is seen as an easy target. This isn't new. This is not a new challenge for us in education. I first got involved. It first came to my attention when I read a book called The Cuckoo's Egg by Cliff Stoll, and that was done. That was written in the early 1980s, before the internet, before you were born, probably before your parents were born, and that showed that the power of university computers was really, really interesting. In those early pre-PC days, we had huge, big machines in universities to do big calculations around masses of data, around astrophysics, or all sorts of different things. Now, the security around those was horrendous. It was just awful. And there were all sorts of dead accounts, there were all sorts of ways to give people super user access. And if you're interested in Cliff Stoll's book, I won't spoil it for you, but a 37-cent discrepancy in monthly accounts led on to a huge investigation, which ended up in the Pentagon. So it's like getting at university systems, you're getting at college systems is not a new challenge. The data, the information in university systems, whether it's student data or whether it's research data, is potentially very, very sensitive. And you just have to look at the number of hits and attacks that are on every educational establishment every day to realize that the cyber criminals think it's worth going at, getting at universities, not least because the data itself is interesting. Of course it is, and is extremely valuable. But there are many interlinked systems, and of course you can get into things like personnel HR systems and the like. As I mentioned at the start, thinking about the education environment in our COVID-19 world was this huge rush to get online quickly. And quite rightly, we've tried to make it as easy and straightforward for everyone, whether it's academics, administrators, students, as possible, to enable us to keep moving forward with learning. But we're at a point now where we think, okay, we've been doing this for 8, 10, 12 weeks. Let's just take stock and let's have a look and see about the issues that we need to address. As I mentioned, that whole working from home environment, all sorts of issues around that, all sorts of really interesting research topics around working from home, and we're learning an awful lot as we move forward. But from my perspective, I'm really interested in making that as secure a space as possible. Thank you. Next slide, please. So, what are we concerned about? Well, all sorts of things. I've talked about cyber attacks. We've got potential insider breaches that might be accidental, that might be malicious. It might be in our rush to get things right. We don't have the control systems in place. It might be in our rush to get things right that we've got too many people with too much access that don't always know exactly what it is that they're doing with that access, don't know how to manage it, don't know how to keep tabs on it. There's a whole set of things around software flaws. I've mentioned Zoom already. You know, there were a number of issues around the use of Zoom, and indeed the pragmatics of how Zoom was used. I keep finding new things. So an example, last week I was on a Teams meeting with a big group of people, with 40 people. I had in my Outlook diary at the same time another meeting which happened to be on WebCT. I had forgotten to decline it and say that I couldn't make it. So half an hour into my Teams meeting, a little box popped up. It said, "You ready to go for your WebCT meeting?" That web meeting, and I said, "No, I don't want to do that." And as I did that, because my Outlook was in the background, I clicked on the "I don't want to go to this meeting" button, but it then, by pure chance, I'd hit my share screen. The person that had set up the Teams meeting hadn't taken away control, so I inadvertently shared my diary with everyone at the Teams meeting, and I'm going, the organizer said somebody's sharing their diary, and I couldn't see that I was sharing my diary, which was bizarre in itself. And one of my friends said, "Alistair, it's you." I went, "Oh my God!" Got it away. But it was and I mean, I hadn't thought to close the different applications down. I do that now. That was an interesting learning situation. It could have been an awful lot worse. It could have been that I had an email that wasn't, not that I send nasty emails, but it might have been an email I didn't want other people to see, or it might have been a bank account, or so we just have to be careful about how we use the technologies, and it can happen to any of us, as I just showed. Then we've got the cloud security. And don't get me wrong, the cloud's wonderful, cloud's great, and absolutely fantastic. It's going to revolutionize the way that we do things, the way we store things, the way we manage our data. That's absolutely tremendous. But there's an issue in terms of geographic distance, and often the cloud is well removed from our normal working environment, and one would hope that in a normal working environment that we would notice if something happened. When it's a cloud provider, we might not notice straight away. We're then dependent on the cloud provider, and many of them give the appropriate security and protocols and the like. But we're dependent on the cloud provider sending us a message to say something's up, something's happened. So just a different issue to be aware of and to think about. And then, of course, there might be hardware issues that it might be our routers, it might be our laptops, it might be different things that are problematic in themselves. You'll notice that I haven't mentioned USB drives at all. We have been moving in terms of hardware to be away from USB drives over the last little while, and I think that will continue. Thank you. So, what do we do? We're in an interesting situation. We want to balance the education and the ease of education with a robust, safe, secure environment. So things that we can do. We can apply the principle of least privilege. Those of you who are going to do if you ever come and do one of my cybersecurity classes, we spend quite a bit of time on the principle of least privilege. That is giving people as little access for as little time, as is necessary. It's a bit of a pain in the neck, but it really, really works. We want to ensure that we encrypt everything, make it difficult for the cyber criminals. We need to educate our academics, our administrators, our students. we need to think about what happens at when we come to the end of a particular situation. So if a member of staff leaves Siggy College or leaves the University of Sunderland, what do we do to make sure that we close down all their access? What do we do when a student graduates? What data do we keep historically? What data do we release? What data do we destroy? And they're all important. They're important things to think about. Often, if I'm asked to investigate with an organization, the first thing I do is try and look at defunct records for staff that have left, because often they're not defunct and they're an easy way to get into organizations. Similarly, with obsolete equipment, the can be a real problem if we don't dispose of our equipment properly. We need to make sure that if we are taking away a PC or a laptop and scrapping it, that we forensically scrap it and clean it and make sure that it's not of any worth to anyone. But similarly, things like printers, like Xerox machines, all very, very smart devices now. We need to think about what we do with those. Again, looking at when I do vulnerability reports for organizations, I will look to see what their policy and protocol for dealing with obsolete equipment is. Often it doesn't exist, which does mean that there's an easy in for cyber criminals. We also, and part of the I mentioned earlier about people offering solutions and the like, and we're at a situation where we haven't got the capacity or the wherewithal to do all the things that we need to do. So we're bringing in third parties, and we need to make sure that we undertake technical due diligence in the same way that if we're entering into a partnership with anyone, we undertake financial due diligence. Thank you. So, forgive me for talking so long. As you know, it's a subject that is really close to my heart, something I'm very, very passionate about. I'm very happy to talk till forever around cybersecurity issues. But hopefully you found it interesting. So in conclusion, cybersecurity is something that we all need to be aware of. It's of growing influence and I hope interest across all of our lives. As I've tried to explain and express, cybersecurity isn't the responsibility of IT services at SEGI or at Sunderland. It's everyone's responsibility, whether it's lecturers, whether it's administrators, or whether it's students. We need to, as educationalists, schools, colleges, universities, take ownership of every single IT initiative. But the big challenge in education, and when you can be part of the solution, is to be secure, be vigilant, be resilient, and be safe. So, thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to hearing your questions, and hopefully I'll be able to address them or indeed point you in the direction of a solution. Thank you.
Lester, for the session. I believe all of us has benefited from the webinar. I do, right? I hope all of you did as well. Let's move to the question and answer session. Okay, to those who are currently watching with us, do type your questions. And I did see some questions have been typed, and I'll just read it in a short while. So for those who are watching, do type your questions in the comment section below. We'll do our best to answer all of them. Okay, let me read one of the questions that was typed in earlier. This is from Zian Chaptiu. All right. The question is, handphone and laptop handphone versus laptop. Which device is safer to use to attend online classroom? Prof?
Interesting question. Good question. It depends. It depends how you set up your laptop. It depends how you set up your handphone, your smartphone. If you put the correct protection in place, they're both equally usable and safe in the environment. If you don't put the protections in place, then they're equally vulnerable. I always use my laptop. And whether that's because I'm old and decrepit and it's easier for me to do that, I don't know. But I always, I don't, like I do things on my smartphone, but I always feel slightly more secure when doing it on my laptop.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Prof. I think it's also, I prefer laptop as well because of the, the size of the screen. I believe that handphone is too small for
No,
everyone.
indeed,
So
my eyes are too bad to read my smartphone.
okay. There's another question from Lee Chun Young. How safe is Zoom? How safe is Zoom? Well,
Well, I don't particularly want to get into a session on Zoom bashing, but there's been a lot written over the last 4 to 6 weeks around what Zoom does and how it's set up. I think the biggest criticism around Zoom, and you can look at any platform, and there are pros and cons on the platform. But with Zoom, certainly in the early days, you had to know what you were doing to set up security. It wasn't intuitive. It wasn't the easiest thing to do, to set up a password for each session, to control and manage the number of people that were the people that were coming in to your Zoom session. So there were all sorts of examples of Zoom bombing, and that being problematic. With people coming in they weren't invited. There was a case that I mentioned earlier with the Vietnamese schools, where inappropriate images were portrayed in a Zoom classroom for young children. There was also earlier concern around if you shared your screen, if you put a PowerPoint set of slides, who then owned that and who had the copyright associated with the slides. We were, and forgive me, I don't know the regulations in Malaysia, but in the UK we have I think called the General Data Protection Regulation, and there was concern that by sharing data without permission, that if you were using Zoom, you were potentially in breach of GDPR. So these were some of the concerns that were raised earlier. There were also things around how the person who was in control of the environment could monitor people, or they could switch them off and switch them on, but they could see what they were doing. So when I thought I was out of camera, the organizer could come and see me. So I might be having a cup of tea, I might be making a sandwich, might be not paying attention, and so they were issues associated with Zoom. To be fair to the Zoom guys, they have taken some of the issues on board and trying to address them.
Yeah, I believe so, because they are over the news recently that Zoom, they are aware of these security threats, and they have actually probably have come up with some solutions to the problem. I'm sure that in time they will able to solve that. What about Webex? Because Webex is actually from a Cisco company. So Cisco is a very popular in terms of networking. So
no, I use WebEx regularly. I like the way that WebEx invites you into a person's personal space. So if I'm running a WebEx session, then I have control of managing that. I tend not to we're a Teams school, so we tend to use Teams rather than WebEx. But some of my external research partners like to use WebEx. So I personally haven't had any problems with WebEx. If there are issues with WebEx or Teams, often it's down to user error rather than
Yeah,
technology.
exactly. Yeah. It's all up to us, yeah, right. Okay, there's another questions here from Orlino Jr. Daguman Rabago. The question is, based on your experience, which is safer in doing online teaching learning, synchronous, example, webinar, Zoom, etc., or asynchronous, uploading video lessons, which means that there's no interactive session. So is there a particular online platform that is proven safe for online teaching? I believe this is similar to the questions we have answered.
Yeah, I mean it's a really good question, and it depends how the software hardware combination is set up. So we've been using Canvas as a VLE and using the big blue button, and you can set that up to be quite secure. My school kids, my kids at school are using Google Classroom, which is as a parent looks robust. So it's often what the institution is set up to support, and we need to be very careful when we're moving to this new normal, that we don't throw away our experiences and our expertise, and put in new solutions just for the sake of it. That we look at what we've got and adapt that and develop that, because that's going to be a much safer, robust environment where everyone that's been involved in the institution understands the security underpinning that. The question about synchronous and asynchronous is a really good one, and particularly when we start to move into pedagogic situations and what is best for students. This is going to sound as if I'm sitting on the fence a little bit, but I think a hybrid solution where we offer both synchronous and asynchronous your options for our students is the best way forward. So I'm sorry for that. It sounds as if I'm ducking the question, but I really think the answer is somewhere in the middle. I wouldn't want to go completely asynchronous. I wouldn't want to go completely synchronous. So that nice blend, and we've moved away from the use of blended learning, because pre-COVID that meant something else, and that's why we were starting to use the term hybrid. So it's the synchronous asynchronous one's a really good question, and is going to shape the way that we participate in education moving forward. Excellent.
Right. I think we still need both. I can agree with you, Prof. The blended kind of learning, because interactively it's quite important, because when questions are asked, like what we're doing right now, I think synchronous is very useful. It's more suitable than anything else. So there are another questions here from Priya Sen. Okay, question sounds like that.
There's an example of software just causing chaos. So in the background, I had taken every other application down before we did this webinar, but for some reason the phone call is still coming through. So a phone call came in there, and it overread everything that you were saying, so I couldn't hear that last bit. So again, we're learning all the time. Real live learning as we live and breathe.
Okay, this question sounds like this, Prof. With the danger that occurred with the usage of Zoom application, what can be done by other such similar applications to prevent the breach? How could that danger be similarly present with other apps?
Yeah. So I think it's a really good question, and we need to almost be platform agnostic and think about what it is that we're trying to achieve. I would, when I'm going into an environment like this, if I'm inviting people, I'll make sure that it's a restricted invitation list. I make sure that the sessions are password protected, and that only people doing that session have that password. I make sure that I change my password every session, and it's not just like Alistair's Zoom, as my password. So it's that's important. As I mentioned, the really important thing is about being aware of the threats, and then when we're aware of the threats, we know what it is that we need to do to prevent those, and minimize the opportunity for the cyber criminals or the people trying to threaten us. And this is where the balance bit comes in. We need to make sure that doesn't adversely upset what we're trying to achieve in the classroom. So there's no point in having a really secure classroom if no students can get into it. Okay, so there's an interesting balance that we have to strike.
Okay, I also think that as educators to teach online using the technology, the lecturers or trainers need to be educated as well on how to use the technology wisely.
Completely agree.
Technology can be a barrier to teaching effectively, isn't it?
Completely agree. So as educationalists, we need to know what it is that we're setting up and how to set that up safely and securely, as well as know how to best pedagogically use the technology. I am very clear in my own mind that technology is not the solution itself. It's the pedagogy that's the solution. The technology enables us to do the pedagogy that we want to.
Yeah, because based on some research, they mentioned that sometimes not. I really agree with you, Prof. It's not about the technology; it's how we conduct the classes using technology. I think it's very important. There are other questions here. Is about the law, cybersecurity law from Core app. All right. Are current cybersecurity laws strong enough to protect users for online activities? I think UK, you have just mentioned it just now.
So that's a really good question. And we're back to a challenge that has faced us for many, many years, going right back to the Budapest Convention at the turn of the century, and how we have global statute that enables protection, and we don't have it. We have different countries have different laws, and different countries have better laws in terms of managing that protection. But once we get into the global situation, how do somebody who's had a breach in the UK prosecute somebody who's attacked them from like Latvia? Or how does somebody in Malaysia go to court to try and address an attack from North Korea? It's very, very difficult to actually follow up litigation. So there are a number of initiatives around global cybersecurity, but it's a long way from being a robust situation. So countries have cybersecurity strategies. Some countries have cybersecurity laws. Countries have data protection legislation. All of those fit into that grand scheme of things. But unfortunately, I think, so others might disagree, quite away from an implementable global solution. Good question. Good question.
Great, yeah. Okay, talking about cloud technology. Yeah, cloud technology. Well, there's a one question here from Rominito Ilumbari. Right. before I read the questions, I do understand that in cloud technology, in order for us to, we never know how secure it is, when data has been stored in the cloud. But if you want to have the security of our data, we need to pay. Yeah, the cost involved, isn't it? Yeah, we need to subscribe to a certain amount of subscribe with a certain amount of money to
Yep.
some cost in order to secure the data. So that is another question. So, but according to from what Ramino Lumbaring asked is keeping student data in cloud safe and secure?
It's a good question. It depends on your cloud provider, and there are safe and secure cloud spaces, and fantastic as we move away from having huge big servers in institutions to manage those student records. But as already been mentioned by David, you get what you pay for. And the more secure and robust the cloud is, the more expensive it is. So yeah, you pay your money and you take your choice. Really, it's maybe not the answer. It's not a yes or no answer. Unfortunately, it's a depends answer.
Okay.
There's a nice PhD in that for you if you're interested in doing that.
Okay, I hope that this answers your questions, Ramonito. Yeah. Another question is from Dino Lear. States here, we are conducting research into user behavior on illegal forums. Is there such a illegal forums? I'm not too sure. We want to observe their behavior and activities. Do you have any tips for doing that safely?
Yeah. So, I think there's not an easy answer to that. I'm very happy to talk with you outside this webinar around that. It's something that is very, very interesting. There are all sorts of interesting research ethics questions around undertaking that type of research. There are it depends on how you are doing that research and whether you set up a simulation and to look at in a controlled environment, and that's one way of doing it. It might be a little bit false. But once you go into a live environment, if you announce that you are a researcher, then it'll change people's behavior just because there's a researcher there. If you don't announce that you're a researcher and that you are in that space as a participant observer or an action researcher or whatever it is that you're doing, there's some really interesting ethical questions around the appropriateness of that. A number of colleagues in the UK have been looking at this for many years, and that whole thing around forums and chat rooms and the like, and getting your question about illegal forums. The fact that it's an illegal forum, should you not be reporting that to the authorities? It's a minefield of interesting research ethics questions. But very happy to talk with you outside because it's a much bigger piece than we've got time to pick that answer for. So Dino, if you wish to, then very happy to pick that up afterwards.
Well, Dino, we want to have appointment with the professor later on.
Very cheap.
Cheap, not free. Okay, this is another question from, this is from Tadika Tunas Impian. I believe this is from the Tasker, from kindergarten. Using Zoom, only teachers required to log in, while students only join sessions with password without login. What are the security concerns that the parents that need to consider for the kids?
Good question. I mean, it's not just, this isn't just a Zoom question, and this isn't just a question around password or with or without logins, both of which are really interesting questions in themselves. This is around parental knowledge and parental consent for getting into online activities. Normally, in a non-COVID-19 world, then there would be parental approval before anything was going on. Parental, you would have the opportunity to observe. You would get regular reports on activity and the like. But one of the things that's been problematic in the rush to keep kids educated is that these things have been bypassed. So that's in itself is a real concern. We have that I've mentioned about digital natives as a real issue for us, that as parents, we don't know what our kids are doing online. So that then is a concern, irrespective of education. Like whether it's on TikTok or whether it's on a chat room or whether it's on Facebook, whatever it might be. There's a real challenge for us in terms of getting kids to talk with young people. My poor children, bless them, hate it because I'll ask them questions. I'll go, who's this? Who are you talking to? Who are you playing Xbox with? Who are you playing this game with? And they go, Dad, leave me alone. Don't boil me with this. It's fine. I said, well, how do you know it's fine? He said he was 15. He said he was 16, the same age as me. I said, I can say I'm 15. It's an awful long time since I was 15, and this is the point I was making about being trustworthy. The other issue is educating parents. And we have done in the UK many sessions where we have offered to go into schools and colleges and talk with parents. I did a few in the autumn term last in 2019, going in just to drop in, have a chat. Nobody's going to think of any less of you for coming along to this. And one would have expected maybe 50, 60 people to come to each of those sessions. The largest number I had was 8.
Wow.
So it's really, really difficult to get that message across. So it's a really, really good question, and one that we should all be thinking about. Excellent.
Well, those who are parents here, well, some tips for you, right, from Prof. There's one more question that this is concerned with technical issues. Before I read the question, I think, Prof, there should be to implement, in any company, or even our college, implementing a security into the systems is inevitable, isn't it? So a good strategic planning should be in place, all right, in order to ensure that the security is well planned and implemented. So what do you think of that? Because I think it's a big question. This question from Regita Pereira. It says that what does company need to do to ensure IT security moving forward?
So a number of things that that we can do. So I know that in Malaysia there are a number of government initiatives, and you should look at those government initiatives. In the UK we have a thing called Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus, and these are benchmarks for organisations, to have that ticket. It's almost like a kite mark type thing, and this is an external review on you do however many questions around your security strategy, policy implementation, and they're really important. There was if I can use the example in the UK, one of the countries in the UK, Wales, has said that in order to work with government contracts, then an organization has to be at least at Cyber Essentials level. And then that means that Cyber Essentials uptake is much higher. So there needs to be a kind of carrot and stick approach to the standard. But I do think that these types of initiatives really help in raising awareness in organizations, particularly small organizations who maybe don't think so much around, or don't have the time or the bandwidth to think about security. Most large organizations will have a CIO and they'll have an infrastructure to consider security. It'll be on the board agenda.
Is also concerned with cost, isn't it? Yeah, because the costing is very much very high.
And you know, there's been quite a bit of research that shows that said, you know, what's the average hit that's going to be? Is it, and I don't know what it is in ringgits, but say it's say the cost for security is 2 million ringgits, and the average loss from an attack is 1 million ringgits. You know, they will. What's the point? But it's not just about the cost of the initial breach; it's the reputational cost. You know, once a breach has been in place, and then what it means for future business and the like. So it's difficult to measure. You would expect me to. I would always advocate that it's worth spending money on security. It will save in the long term.
Okay. One last question, Prof, before we call it a day. All right. It's from Orlino again. Are companies liable for security breach which led to exposure, theft, and usurpation of client subscribers' identity? Is there any legal remedy on the part of the affected individuals if the problem happened from other places?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and it depends on which country you're in. And unfortunately, I don't know the legal position in Malaysia, but the more recent GDPR regulations that have been put in place in the UK is that when companies come across a security breach, they have 3 days to announce that breach and make it public. The Information Commission Office, the ICO, will inadvertently they will fine companies for breach of security. So there is that carrot and stick approach. Now that becomes problematic in that very many organizations don't realize that there's been a security breach, and something the average time to notice a breach ranges greatly, but it's 6 months isn't like too much of a stretch to say that it takes folk that length of time to identify the breaches. So it's a real problem. So and you get into a bizarre situation, because it's a really good question. So an organization has a breach, right? Because they haven't put security in, and clients' data goes into the wild. Yeah. What that means is that if they get a fine, that fine then goes into the government pot. It then isn't there for the organization to invest in the security. So somebody, one of the airlines that I regularly book tickets with in the UK, sent me an email last week to say we've had a security breach. They're following the regulation, and I'm thinking, oh, that's not good. They said we're fairly certain that they haven't got your credit card details, but they may well have your date of birth and your passport details. What do you do? So it's a really good question, and a really interesting challenge for us all.
Right. Thanks, Prof. Well, that's the last question for our questions for today. On behalf of all participants, I would like to thank Professor Alastair Irons for your sharing today. Very informative. Thank you so much again for all the participants.
Thank you. It's a real shame that I haven't been able to see you, but thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to seeing you all at some point in the future.
Okay, if you do not want to miss any of upcoming sessions, you can also subscribe with us by joining our Telegram group. Please go to the link now to join the group. You can also find the link in the description. Okay, before we end today's session, as promised, a certificate will be issued to you. Please go to this link and fill in your details. Okay, can you see the link? So the certificate shall be sent to you via email within 30 days from today. To my colleagues in SEGI, you can also go into the same link for your certificate. All right, I think the certificate link is there. Okay. Okay, thank you very much again, all of you. We'll see you in the next webinar series. Good night and good afternoon to Prof.